In this lecture, we're looking at foreign policy as a concept in international relations of how countries deal with other countries on the global stage. So let's take a look at this closely. It's a very important topic in political science under the subject of international relations. And it's important for us to understand these students today as we begin to look at international relations closely. So we begin with a very basic definition of what foreign policy is. It says here, foreign policy refers to strategies. Please take note of this. It says here, so let's begin by taking a closer look at this. Foreign policy refers to strategies and decisions made by a country in its interaction with other countries, right? So, how it interacts with other countries. Foreign policy has nothing to do with domestic policies, right? Although there's sometimes a connection between domestic policies and foreign policies, but essentially foreign policies are targeted to countries, right, that are neighboring countries around the world, targeted at them in terms of how countries will deal with countries, how a particular country will interact with other countries on the basis of its own interest, right? So foreign policy, please take note of this, students. Foreign policy deals with interest, right? What are the interests? What are the interests of a certain country, right? And they pursue those interests through foreign policy, right? So foreign policy is very important in this context because this is how countries, in some cases, control other countries. This is how countries announce themselves on the global stage as very, very important and pursuing certain goals. So, and those goals are always based on interest and specifically national interest, right? So there's an interaction between foreign policy and national interest because it's based on national interest. A country will always consider its national interest in its foreign policy. So, for example, if a country is very close to another country and offering military protection, take a closer look at that relationship. Most likely, that country that is providing, hardware, equipment, defense of the other country has something to gain. Maybe they have some natural resources they're interested in, right? So they will exchange the military protection for those natural resources. That is national interest. Their national interest is always at the forefront. Once again, foreign policy refers to the strategies and decisions made by a country in its interaction with other countries. Please take note of this, students. It encompasses, right, a wide range of issues. So foreign policy is not a single dimensional, it is multidimensional, especially for big countries. They have many, many interests. They have many, many issues they deal with. And they have foreign policies. They have policies that guide how they interact with other countries on those issues. So it says here it encompasses a wide range of issues. Take note of this, students, wide range of issues, including diplomacy, right? What is diplomacy? How you deal with other countries in a very peaceful way. In a very peaceful way, diplomacy, trade, defense, international agreements, right? This is where treaties come in. Please take note, let's put that here. Treaties, right, under international agreements. Treaties come in here, humanitarian efforts coming here as well, where there is a crisis. How do countries react to those crises? Some countries will take in refugees. They will extend their hand to take refugees as part of their foreign policy, overall foreign policy, to be seen as humanitarian, to be seen as a country that is caring and so forth, right? So let's take a look at this closely, students, because this is important. This is the heart of foreign policy. So let's take a look at this closely. It encompasses a wide range of issues, and those issues, students, include diplomacy, trade, defense, international agreements, and humanitarian efforts. It could also include climate, the environment, right? The environment. It will also include military as well. Right? There are many areas, students, these are just examples, but there are many areas where foreign policy will have an impact, where foreign policy is exerted. Right? So the goal of foreign policy can include promoting national security. No country in the world today will have foreign policy that will only benefit other countries and they are not benefiting from it. It doesn't happen. They are always at the forefront. Their national interests are always at the forefront. And there's a saying in political science that says there are no permanent friends, but permanent interests. Take note of this. No permanent friends in politics. The interest is there, but they just use different countries to achieve that interest, depending on how you interact with them. Today, you are friends with this country. You can use this country to achieve your national interest, and maybe a few years later, that country has fallen out of favor. Another country comes in to fulfill the national interest of the country that is pursuing, obviously, their national interest. Okay, so the goal of foreign policy can include promoting national security, fostering economic interest, supporting human rights, right, of course, and enhancing a nation's global standing. There are many reasons here. There are many motivations here. Please take note, students. Many reasons why countries will promote their foreign policy. They want to enhance their standing on the global stage. They want to be sure that countries see them as serious, as impactful, etc. They want to make sure that countries can rely on them. They want to make sure that their image on the international stage is respected. Here we say, let's go back to the goals of foreign policy. Please take note of this once again. The goals of foreign policy can include promoting national security, right? And national security, in this sense, means that a country has to ensure that its own interest is protected. That's why, in some cases, some countries invade other countries because they say they are protecting their national interest. A good example is Russia invading Ukraine. Russia invaded Ukraine to ensure that NATO doesn't come too close. So it invaded Ukraine based on national interest. This is a very, very good example. And there are countries all over the place. Iraq versus Kuwait in 1991 is another example. Iraq invading Kuwait, saying that Kuwait was part of its territory many, many years ago. Countries always look after their national interest because that's first and foremost. That is first and foremost. All right, so let's take a look at this one more time. The goals of foreign policy can include promoting national interest, national security, fostering economic interest, supporting human rights, and enhancing a nation's global standing. Like we said, it can also include climate. Right? What are your policies towards the climate? You can say no deforestation. All the national companies must abide by certain rules and regulations. Right? You can put a limit on them and so forth. You can sanction, as part of your foreign policy, countries that are not abiding by climate change policies. You can sanction them. You can hold them accountable in different ways. That is part of the foreign policy as well, right? So then it says each country develops its foreign policy based on its unique interest, whatever those interests are, right? So it could be, again, military. It could be military. It could be economics. It could be politics, right? It could be culture as well. There are many, many reasons here. So each country develops its foreign policy based on its unique interest, the values of that country, the historical context of that country, and the geopolitical considerations of that country, among others, right? This list is not exhaustive by any means, right? So foreign policies are based on a country's internal elements, such as values and interests and history, right, and geopolitics and geopolitical considerations. So Japan, for example, has this history that it's not going to be, because of the Second World War and its involvement, it's not going to have nuclear weapons. In Germany, the same thing. Or it's not going to have such a powerful army that has nuclear weapons that could threaten, the world. So foreign policy is very important because that is how countries make their positions clear on the global stage as to where they are going, the direction they are going, as to how they will interact with certain situations, as to how they will respond to certain situations, based on their own national interest, their own history, their geopolitical considerations, a whole host of things, right? Their location, who is their neighbor, for example, what are the natural resources they have, for example. As a good example, Nepal has the tallest mountain in the world, Mount Everest. That mountain, that natural resource will inform its foreign policy in terms of tourism, in terms of the climate. Who comes to the country as a tourist? What are the considerations here in terms of the mountain and the climate, right? So many things they can put in place, regarding a mountain. So that mountain informs their foreign policy, etc. Right? And same thing with waterways and the natural resources, how they use natural resources, and how would they allow, for example, to tap into their natural resources, right? It's a country building a nuclear weapon. And is that country that has the natural resources opposed to nuclear weapon and proliferation of nuclear weapon? That will inform its foreign policy and by extension determine who taps its natural resources, etc. So take note of this, students. Let's just go over this one more time in terms of the definition of foreign policy and some of the motivations for foreign policy, some of the basis for foreign policy. Foreign policy refers to strategies, right? Focus, direction, right? And decisions made by a country's interaction with other countries or other nations, right? It encompasses a wide range of issues, including diplomacy, trade, defense, international agreements, for example, treaties, and humanitarian efforts, right? Climate, environment, and sometimes military, etc. The goal of foreign policy, therefore, can include promoting national interest, and it's always about national interest. At the end of the day, whatever policy it is, if it's a policy towards refugees, it's about national interest. Maybe those refugees will come and support its economy. Maybe it wants to be seen, the country wants to be seen as a humanitarian country. That's in its national interest. All right, so the goal of foreign policy can include promoting national security, once again, fostering economic interest, supporting human rights, and enhancing a nation's global standing. Each country develops its foreign policy based on a number of factors. Yeah, just some of those factors: interest, values, history, geopolitical consideration, location, who are your neighbors? Are they hostile to you? Are they friendly to you? Do they have resources, etc.? So all of these things, even religion, also influences foreign policy. So this is the definition of foreign policy, a very important concept in international relations, how countries interact with countries on the global stage.